News Special Report.
Good day, everyone. I'm Amy Robach. We are coming on the air because authorities are about to hold a press conference here, updating that horrific school shooting here in Uvalde, Texas. Of course, shattering this small community. 19 children killed, most of them third and fourth graders, along with 2 teachers. The second deadliest school shooting in U.S. history, coming nearly a decade after Newtown. It happened just 10 days after that horrific crime in Buffalo as well. We're going to take a listen now to the briefing.
It is intolerable and it is unacceptable for us to have in the state anybody who would kill little kids in our schools. Children are a blessing. God teaches us that. They're filled with laughter, innocence, and joy. Their love is a gift that parents get to unwrap every single day. Parents in Uvalde had that gift taken away from them, stolen by a demented person. Days before yesterday, when these children were at school, some were receiving awards for perfect attendance. These kids will never attend school again. To say the least, Uvalde has been shaken to its core. Families are broken apart. Hearts are forever shattered. All Texans are grieving with the people of Uvalde, and people are rightfully angry about what has happened. Events like this, they tear at the fabric of a community. Our job is to ensure that the community is not going to be ripped apart. All Texans must come together and support the families who have been affected by this horrific tragedy. What they need now more than ever is our love. What they need is uplifting from all of our fellow Texans and all of our fellow Americans. And let me emphasize something that I know you all know. But the reality is, as horrible as what happened, it could have been worse. The reason it was not worse is because law enforcement officials did what they do. They showed amazing courage by running toward gunfire for the singular purpose of trying to save lives. And it is a fact that because of their quick response, getting on the scene, being able to respond to the gunman and eliminate the gunman, they were able to save lives. Unfortunately, not enough. But I want to make sure that everybody knows, all of the law enforcement agencies and groups that are involved and were involved in this process. The Texas Rangers are leading the investigation, and they are supported by the Texas Department of Public Safety Highway Patrol, the Texas Department of Public Safety Criminal Investigative Division, DPS Aircraft, DPS Intelligence Counter and Terrorism Division, DPS Crime and Victim Support. They're also supported by the Texas Division of Emergency Management, the FBI, as well as multiple federal partners, including the DEA, ATF, HSI, and Border Patrol. And then, of course, the valiant local officials, the Uvalde Sheriff's Department, Uvalde Police Department, Uvalde Independent School District Police, Uvalde County Constables, Uvalde Mayor, the County Judge, Uvalde District Attorney's Office, local public works and surrounding police department, and the San Antonio Police and Fire Department also. Let me walk you through some of the facts of what has happened. There's been a lot of things that have been said. Some are correct, some are incorrect. Let me tell you the best information that we have at this time, understanding, very importantly, that this is an ongoing investigation, and ongoing investigations often reveal new information as those investigations progress. The first thing that happened was that the gunman shot his grandmother in the face. She then contacted police. The gunman fled, and as he was fleeing, he had an accident just outside of the elementary school, and he ran into the school. Officers with the Consolidated Independent School District, they approached the gunman and engaged with the gunman at that time. The gunman then entered a back door and went down 2 short hallways and then into a classroom on the left-hand side. The gunman entered into that classroom, and the classroom was connected internally to another classroom. Border Patrol, Consolidated ISD officers, police, sheriffs, and DPS officers converged on that classroom, and a Border Patrol officer killed the gunman. As I said, Texas Rangers are leading the investigation, joined by federal, state, and local law enforcement officials. At this time, we know that 19 children have lost their lives. 2 faculty members lost their lives. In addition to that, there are 17 people who are injured, but their injuries are not life-threatening. All family members of all of these students and faculty members have been contacted and informed about the circumstances. Officials are working with parents to ensure that their parents are going to be able to see their children. Parents should contact victim services at the county fairplex. We know that there are parents still striving to make a connection. All parents are welcome and urged to contact victim services at the county fairplex. The gunman was 18 years old and reportedly a high school dropout. Reportedly, there has been no criminal history identified yet. He may have had a juvenile record, but that is yet to be determined. There was no known mental health history of the gunman. He used one weapon, which was an AR-15, using 223 rounds. There was no meaningful forewarning of this crime other than what I'm about to tell you. As of this time, the only information that was known in advance was posted by the gunman on Facebook approximately 30 minutes before reaching the school. The first post was to the point of, he said, "I'm going to shoot my grandmother." The second post was, "I shot my grandmother." The third post, maybe less than 15 minutes before arriving at the school, was, "I'm going to shoot an elementary school." I mentioned that during the shootout that took place at the school, in addition to the students and the faculty, There were 3 officers who were injured who were all remain in good condition. 1 deputy sheriff lost a daughter in that school. Before coming out here, we had a long discussion with law enforcement at all levels. We had a discussion with community leaders, elected officials. And I asked the sheriff and others an open-ended question and got the same answer from the sheriff as well as from the mayor of Uvalde. The question was, what is the problem here? And they were straightforward and emphatic. They said, we have a problem with mental health illness in this community. And then they elaborated on the magnitude of the mental health challenges that they are facing in the community and the need for more mental health support in this region. I want to make sure everybody understands the mental health services that are available at this time, with me making one clarifying point in advance that I'm going to redouble down in the aftermath. Whenever anything as shocking and extraordinary and disturbing as this event occurs, there is an urgent need for everybody affected to access mental health. I cannot be more emphatic than saying with great urgency, everybody in this community, I mean everybody, the victims, the families, family members, friends, the law enforcement involved, but the entire community is in utter shock about this. Some physical wounds that were sustained by the officers, they're going to heal in the coming days. The mental and emotional wounds are far harder to see and last far longer. The state of Texas, working with federal and local officials and agencies, we're going to be here for a long, long time. And one key point that we will focus on is making sure that everybody in this community has the access they need for as long as they need it to address with the mental and emotional health care needs that they have. I want to list various agencies and make sure these are made available to the public. The mental health services currently available are from victim services from across the area, from federal, state, and local levels, including the Family Resource Center at the Uvalde County Fairplex. Schools have crisis teams at the Uvalde Civic Center. They provide wraparound services for families who are affected. The Texas Child Mental Health Consortium, created by the state legislature in 2019, is available to assist. The Bluebonnet Children's Advocacy Center is available to provide services for children. The Texas Health and Human Services Commission is on site and will be available for ongoing provision of services. The Texas Education Agency is providing supplemental counseling services. The Texas Department of Public Safety Counseling is providing counseling services for law enforcement. And the FBI is also bringing in mental health services for law enforcement. It cannot be overemphasized the importance of law enforcement officers, all of them, seeking out and obtaining this mental health counseling. The District Attorney's Office for Victim Services has a phone number available for all victims, and candidly, the entire community, in a way, is a victim here. And I was provided their number to give out to you publicly. This is the number for the District Attorney's Office for Victim Services. The number is 830-278-2916. And at this time, I will pass the mic to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Sit down.
You're out of line and an embarrassment.
Sit down and don't play this stuff.
The next shooting is right now, and you are doing nothing.
No, he needs to get his ass out of here. This isn't the place to talk this over.
This is totally predictable. When you,
Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Please leave this auditorium. I can't believe you're a sick son of a bitch that would come to a deal like this to make a political issue. It's on assholes like you. Why don't you get out of here?
As we're watching this unfolding here during this press conference, we've got Matt Gutman there in the room when this is happening. That is Beto O'Rourke yelling at the Governor Greg Abott, saying this could have been avoided. You can see how passionate and heated he is. The governor asking him to be removed from the auditorium. Matt, tell us what you're seeing, what you're hearing there.
There are family members. There are family members who are crying as we speak. There are family members whose hearts are broken. There's no words that anybody shouting can come up here and do anything to heal those broken hearts. We all, every Texan, every American has a responsibility where we need to focus not on ourselves and our agendas. We need to focus on the healing and hope that we can provide to those who have suffered unconscionable damage to their lives and loss of life. We need all Texans to, in this one moment in time, put aside personal agendas, think of somebody other than ourselves, think about the people who are hurt, and help those who have been hurt. And this time, Lieutenant Governor will speak.
I was just about to say that there will be plenty of time to discuss and analyze what happened yesterday and do everything that we can within our power to hopefully prevent it from happening again. But now's a time, people watching around the world, in this country, in this state, to focus on these families, as the governor just said. Right now, we need to put our arms around the families of these victims, the students and the teachers. This is not a partisan issue. This is not a political issue.
Confirming I'm going to, as we're listening to the Lieutenant Governor speak, following a very heated exchange between Governor Abbott and former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke. He has left the auditorium. He was asked to leave the auditorium by the governor, and he's now speaking to cameras now, so let's take a listen.
Greg Abott in the state of Texas is the county jail system in the state of Texas. The largest inpatient mental health care facility in the state of Texas is the Harris County Jail in downtown Houston, Texas. He's refused to expand Medicaid, which would bring $10 billion a year, including mental health care access for people who need it. He's refused to champion red flag laws. When somebody says that they are having trouble, that they may kill somebody, they may kill themselves, a red flag law would protect the public. He's refused to support safe storage laws so young people cannot get their hands on their parents' guns. He's refused to support a ban on AR-15s and AK-47s. This 18-year-old who just turned 18 bought an AR-15 15 and took it into an elementary school and shot kids in the face and killed them. Why are we letting this happen in this country? Why is this happening in this state? Year after year, city after city. This is on all of us if we do not do something, and I am going to do something, and I'm not alone. The people of Texas are with us. The majority of the people of Texas are with us, but we've got to stand up to this, or we just accept this theater and business as usual, and we accept the next shooting. We could have stopped this if we had stood up after Santa Fe High School, if we had stood up after El Paso. We are going to stop the next one. We're standing up right here in Uvalde, Texas right now. That's why I'm here. What the people of Texas want right now, that's what we're going to focus on.
Beto, there are more guns here than almost anywhere else. Beto, what are you going to do about the guns in this state? Beto, what about the guns in this state?
What makes this one different? Why is this different? Todo lo que es posible para prevenir estas masacres que tenemos en cada comunidad. Sutherland Springs, Santa Fe High School en el condado, acerca de Harris, en El Paso también. Tenemos el poder, pero necesitamos hacer algo en este momento. Si no hacemos algo,
candidate for governor, Beto O'Rourke. He was asked to leave the auditorium after impassionately speaking out and speaking up after hearing Governor Abbott talk about this horrific mass shooting where 19 children were killed. 2 other adults also killed, one of them a teacher. So passions are high. He has left the auditorium speaking to reporters there about what's wrong and what he'd like to fix if he became governor. The lieutenant governor speaking inside right now. Our Maria Villarreal is there inside the auditorium, and she was there to witness it all. Maria, tell us what you saw, what you heard, what it was like there in the auditorium.
Well, so Amy, we know that right now the press conference is still going on behind us, so I'm going to keep a low tone as we explain exactly what happened. The governor had just finished giving out information on resources having to do with mental health. There was a pause as the lieutenant governor, Dan Patrick, was set to take the microphone. We saw a man rush up to the stage and immediately start yelling at the governor and the people that are on the stage right now. Initially, from where we are standing, which is on the backside of this facility, we didn't really know exactly who was up there. But as I turned over to the photographer and the producer here with me, both of them said, we're pretty sure this is Beto O'Rourke going up there. As you just mentioned right now, Beto is up for election right now. He is running for governor here in Texas. Immediately there was a heated exchange with him and the people on the stage, but they also started to hear people from the audience yelling at him, telling him he needed to leave, that this was not about politics, that this was not the place for him to make a stance. He was escorted out by Texas DPS troopers. He went outside, and then, as we just heard a few minutes ago, he started to give his own press conference outside about his frustrations with gun control here, and also putting the blame of these situations, several mass shootings, on the plate of the governor and his administration here in Texas. Amy?
Maria, thank you very much. And we also want to turn now to our Pierre Thomas, Chief Justice Correspondent here with ABC News, as we watch this all unfold. Obviously, tensions are high. Fingers are already starting to be pointed with just 24 hours since this mass shooting, and families still grieving, as Governor Abbott pointed out, as he escorted Beto O'Rourke out of that auditorium. Pierre, I want to ask you, because obviously gun violence has been escalating, and there's the question, is it the guns, is it mental health, is it both? But we know that since 2017, the FBI's latest report, gun-related violence up 100% in these types of attacks.
Amy, it's an incredible statistic that you just pointed to. They specifically have been looking at active shooter scenarios. And back in 2013, there were only 17 active shooter scenarios in the entire country. Last year, there were 60. And this is just a stunning increase. It has the FBI, Homeland Security officials quite concerned. It's also accompanied by a massive surge in mass shootings where 4 or more people were shot or killed in these kind of incidents. So they know that there's a phenomenon unfolding, and it's a witch's brew involving mental health issues, extremists, and people who are just otherwise unstable and evil, and they have access to the incredible amount of guns out there. And as you can see in case after case, in 2 weeks, 2 18-year-olds able to legally buy those assault rifles.
Yeah, a witch's brew indeed, Pierre. I want to turn to ABC's investigative reporter, Aaron Katersky, because in terms of that access that we're talking about, this gunman had just turned 18 years old. He was able to buy not one, but two AR-15s in a very short period of time, just in a matter of days of his 18th birthday, and it's perfectly legal.
Perfectly legal, Amy, and it all happened in a span of just 8 days from the time the shooter, identified as Salvatore Ramos, ended up turning 18, buying two AR-15 style rifles, and then using at least one of them in Robb Elementary School. And we did get some new details from the governor about how that all unfolded. The governor said that the shooter engaged with police outside the school, went inside the school, entered a classroom. There was an adjoining classroom. He opened fire, barricaded himself in that classroom, and then finally law enforcement from Uvalde Police and Customs and Border Protection agents raced in to try to put themselves between the children and the gunman. A number of law enforcement officers were shot. They're going to be okay, but 19 children are now dead. And you heard the governor say that families are grieving. The governor mentioned there was no meaningful forewarning. But as investigators dig into social media and talk to the gunman's friends and associates, they are uncovering some troubling signs about the shooter. It turns out, Amy, we've learned from law enforcement officials that he may have been abusing animals and posting openly about it online. There's a picture developing of an isolated, lonely young man who was having trouble at home, trouble at school, and as one law enforcement source told us, he had all of the indicators. Amy.
Aaron Katersky, we appreciate that, and certainly the why and the how in this are still unraveling as we speak. I want to turn now to ABC Chief National Correspondent Matt Gutman. He was inside the auditorium, as we mentioned, when this outburst first happened between Beto O'Rourke and Governor Abbott. He then followed Beto O'Rourke outside, and he is there now to talk about what unfolded outside of the auditorium and what you witnessed, Matt.
Amy, you can probably see the scrum behind me. You may not be able to see Beto there, but he is standing sort of in the middle. You can see that bunch of cameras. I don't think anybody expected that to happen. I've seen a lot of these, and generally there is a certain decorum to these kinds of very solemn press conferences. The governor talking about 19 dead children, truly making it dramatic, slowing it down the way he was talking. But Beto O'Rourke came in there and just blew it up by demanding answers, saying, you know, mental health is a problem. It's not the solution. He said basically the definition of insanity is allowing an 18-year-old boy, essentially a young man, to buy an AR-15 style rifle with a high-capacity magazine without necessarily a background check or needing a license. This kid didn't even have a driver's license, couldn't drive a car. That is what O'Rourke was here to say. It was obviously quite a dramatic way to make a point, and it essentially destroyed that press conference. And he's still holding court right now, talking about what actually needs to be done, making a big point of noting that Governor Abbott is going to headline the NRA meeting in Houston here in Texas this week. So he's talking about mental health, the governor is, but not talking about the other major issue, which is guns in a state that has seen 5 of the most deadly mass shootings in the nation's history. He's demanding action, saying that the action being offered by Governor Abbott is not action at all. So I think offering the very different side of the story that a lot of people here, even in this community, are talking about as well. How does a kid like that get an AR-15 with a high-capacity magazine without any questions asked, Amy? Sorry about the horn.
All right, Matt Gutman, no problem. It's a chaotic scene there indeed, but we're going to go back inside the auditorium. We're going to take a listen to the very latest.
A tragic event in this magnitude in our community is heartbreaking. It really is. We have had a lot of support here from our community, surrounding counties, surrounding districts, and all over the state, and I appreciate you for thinking of us and sending that support. I have to relay the heartbreak of our teachers at Robb campus. I met with them this morning, but as I looked across that room, there was a group of heroes in that room. If it weren't for them, along with the law enforcement that came, that were willing to cradle their kids, get them out of the classroom when it was safe, when they were guided, and the trust our kids had in their teachers, That says volumes for our staff here in Uvalde. They are heroes. They did heroic things yesterday, and they are always very humble, but they are truly humble heroes. Yesterday, we lost 2 teachers. These 2 teachers, I would say, are the cornerstone of that campus to some great degree. They are 2 beautiful souls. They have taught on that campus for many years. They have kids in our district, and they poured their heart and soul into what they did in educating our kids in Uvalde. 19 students, 19 precious students who came to school yesterday to enjoy the day, to enjoy the award assembly. And as I look at their pictures, you can just tell by their angelic smile that they were loved, that they loved coming to school, and they were just precious individuals. This is a difficult time for everybody. We are hurting. We have been cut deep here in our community. We will move forward. It's going to take some time moving forward. While our faith has been shaken, we ask you to continue to pray for these families, these kids in our community, and our teachers. I am a product of Uvalde. I'm born and raised here. I've worked for this district for 30 years. I never thought I would be sitting in front of you doing this today. But please pray for our teachers, pray for our community, and we will move forward. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. We'll take a few questions.
Governor, you've talked a lot about not talking about guns. Do you think an 18-year-old has been able to find a weapon that he wanted? Would you make any changes as far as gun laws?
So the ability of an 18-year-old to buy a long gun has been in place in the state of Texas for more than 60 years. And think about during the time over the course of that 60 years, we have not had episodes like this. And why is it that for the majority of those 60 years, we did not have school shootings? And why is it that we do now? The reality is I don't know the answer to that question. However, what I do know in talking to the leaders here, as well as leaders in other locations around the state, and that is one thing that has substantially changed is the status of mental health in our communities. What I do know is this, and that is we as a state, we as a society need to do a better job with mental health. Anybody who shoots somebody else has a mental health challenge, period. We as a government need to find a way to target that mental health challenge and do something about it. Director McCraw will have the best information on that.
We're in the process of doing the crime scene right now. The first one being the school, the second being the vehicle, and the third, the grandmother's residence. And I can tell you where it's a detailed process, so I can't answer that. But for right now, we believe that all the children were shot and killed by Ramos.
Director, in terms of the perpetrators, social media and postings that have been reported and analyzed, you don't believe that there was any sort of a warning or any information that would indicate that he was posing some sort of danger, maybe not a precise danger to this specific school, but weren't there warning signs that were available on social media, maybe to the platform, maybe to people he was communicating with?
We did see some, and I think one was of a concern, and that concern was, relayed to allegedly, we haven't confirmed it yet, to someone in California who didn't report it. And we're in the process of working with the FBI right now to make sure she's interviewed and find out more about it. There may be other clues out there right now that we're not aware of. This is a preliminary part of the investigation, and we're going to scour everything to find anything that what could have indicated in some way, shape, or form that this individual was a threat to the community.
But nothing had come to local law enforcement
None at all. In fact, this is, we're astounded at the beginning of the investigation because there's usually something out there, but right now it is as that reported on the timeline. If we find out something else, we'll provide that information.
What more can be done to assist school districts to operationalize these threats that the plans and those hazards?
So I'm going to answer in part, but we also have the TEA Commissioner Mike Morath with us, who may be able to shed additional light. But here's the information that we know, and you pointed out SB 11. Listen, as you know, but others may not. People need to understand that in the aftermath of the Santa Fe shooting, I signed 17 laws to address school safety. And one of them dealt with threat assessment and preparation for threat assessment. And there are certain standards that schools are required to comply with to make sure that they are addressing threat assessments. I have no information as we speak at this particular time about the status. Addressing threat assessments. I have no information as we speak at this particular time about the status of this particular elementary school or the ISD about what the status was concerning threat assessments. However, to make sure that your broader question is answered sufficiently, Mike, you want to come up? The person coming up is Mike Morath, who is the commissioner for the Texas Education Agency.
So there's significant appropriations provided to ensure that the local school systems around the state have resources for this. One of the components of Senate Bill 11 was a school safety allotment. There was additional upfront funding for that. The Texas School Safety Center and our agency work in collaboration to provide technical assistance and training to school district leaders, counseling team leaders, others, to ensure that the threat assessment protocols and these procedures, including threat response plans and the operational multi-hazard plans, are practiced on a recurring basis. So there have been essentially fairly significant efforts to bolster those managerial practices and these detective or preventative practices in schools all over the state of Texas. We will continue to do more. After any incident like this, of course, you reflect on lessons learned to ensure that we can prevent this kind of situation in schools going forward.
Yeah, if I can just add to that.
One sec. I'll call on you next. 1 second.
If I can just add to that briefly, in 19, the House and the Senate worked together, put $100 million into trying to give the schools all the tools that they needed to try and protect the students. The Marshals program, the Guardian program to arm teachers where schools want it. We left a lot of those programs optional up to the parents and the school boards and the school districts, and they're doing the best they can. And you're always going to have, again, no matter what you do, there's going to be someone to find another area that's vulnerable. But the legislature did act. The governor signed those bills, but we can and need to do more. And in the area of mental health, we've also been working on that as well, but need to do more. We've got to, in our smaller schools where we can get down to one entrance might be one of those solutions. If you had taken 3 more minutes to find an open door, police were there pretty quickly. But this school district has been doing a really good job in trying to protect their students, and those teachers died yesterday protecting their students. And this is a continued work for us.
Governor, you were at a political fundraiser in Walker County. Why did you not cancel that event? And your press office stated that you plan on canceling all future political events going forward until further notice. Does that include the NRA convention here in Houston on Friday?
So first, with regard to yesterday, and that is when I learned about the shooting that was taking place pretty much at that time here. On the way back to Austin, I stopped and let people know that I could not stay, that I needed to go, and I wanted them to know what happened and get back to Austin so that I could continue my collaboration with Texas law enforcement to make sure that all the needs were being met here in the Uvalde area. As far as future plans are concerned, listen, I'm living moment to moment right now. My heart, my head, and my body are in Uvalde right now, and I'm here to help the people who are hurting.
I can't. It's going to be within a minute, like 40 minutes or something, within an hour. But I don't want to give you a particular timeline. But bottom line is that law enforcement was there. They did engage immediately. They did contain them in the classroom, and they put a tactical stack together, in a very orderly way, and of course breached and assaulted the individual. The initial engagement? No, I mean, it was just, it confronted him and wanted to find out, because he see the report, heard the accident, and was out trying to check on that particular crash when he saw it. So he followed him right in immediately, okay, and when rounds were exchanged. And of course, then also we had 2 Uvalde police officers previously described that went in and was involved in also the shooting with the subject and were wounded. And of course, they were also responsible for containing him in that area.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Well, I don't know where he was in the community, but obviously in the Uvalde area, because they got there so quickly and in force. And of course, I'll let them answer that question. But they were there in force, and of course, they were importantly, they had some members of their tactical team there on the Vortex team, and they took the lead on that stack. But I'll defer to, I think I have a Border Patrol uniformed.
Thank you. So first off, the U.S. Border Patrol Del Rio sector has a station in Uvalde. So we have about 150 or so agents that are permanently assigned to Uvalde. We also have several agents in other stations that choose to live here in this community as well. So we had folks that came from off-duty. We had folks that came from training. We had folks that were in the field and responded. So a multitude, some 80 in total, Border Patrol agents responded. So as to where that particular individual came from, don't have that yet. The investigation will bear out, but we have a large presence permanently here in Uvalde.
Did you?
Not going to release his name just yet.
Go ahead. We began talking about it in there. I'll just tell you one thing that we talked about, which is something we've heard in some other regions of Texas also, and that is in approximately maybe as much as a 40-county region around the area where we gather right now, there is no mental health hospital, and there's a shortage of beds for mental health in this region. If someone is suicidal, if someone has a mental health problem, they oftentimes would have to go to someplace like San Antonio. And with the growing population in this region, with the profound mental health challenges that were discussed with us, one takeaway I had was that there is greater need for a physical mental health care facility in this region. But we know that buildings don't treat people, people treat people. And so there needs to be more personnel, more strategies, a greater understanding by the mental health care provider community about what the needs are, and they will be best equipped to know the best way to provide, or let's say meet those needs. Bottom line is this, and that is, I think it's a fair statement, that legislative leaders understand about health challenges in the more rural settings in the state of Texas, and we have a genuine commitment to help address those mental health care challenges. It's one of those issues that was widely discussed in the last several sessions and in particular in the 2019 session. And pretty much every issue was raised by one legislator or another about potential ways to address shootings like this. And the consensus arose around those 17 bills that I did sign, that they hardened schools, they made schools safer, they addressed mental health, and issues like that were the solutions that were agreed upon by legislators at that time. And that is going to be the similar approach that I perceive legislators will continue to focus on. We consider that what we did in 2019 to be one of the most profound legislative sessions, not just in Texas, but we've seen in any state in addressing school shootings. That said, to be clear, we all understand our work is not done. Our work must continue. And we will continue to discuss with legislators about all the potential avenues and pathways that we can take to make sure that schools will be even safer going forward. And I know people like to try to oversimplify this. Let's talk about some real facts. And that is, there are, quote, real gun laws in Chicago. There are, quote, real gun laws in New York. There are real gun laws in California. I hate to say this, but there are more people who were shot every weekend in Chicago than there are in schools in Texas. And we need to realize that people who think that, well, maybe if we could just implement tougher gun laws, it's going to solve it. Chicago and LA and New York disprove that thesis. And so if you're looking for a real solution, Chicago teaches that what you're talking about is not a real solution. Our job is to come up with real solutions that we can implement.
With the 17 laws that you said you signed, and in the context of those laws, and I agree with Lieutenant Governor about that there's always going to be evil, there's always going to be a necessity for law enforcement with good names to stand up against evil. So in the context of those laws, is there a plan to secure schools more readily with fencing and security guards? Because the fences around here are very low, easy access. One of the things that you said about one-point entry, I know where in the district where my children go to school, we have a one-point entry in Harper, Texas. And I have family down here that were affected by this yesterday, and so that's why I'm here today. And so within the context of those 17 laws, is there a plan to address real security safety? Is there funds for it to apply to that?
So the last thing first, and that is altogether, we allocated more than $600 million, so more than $500 million to address school safety. As it concerns the first parts of your question, the answer is, with the laws that we passed in 2019, which is 3 years ago, all those measures that you were talking about were included in those laws. Let me give you several examples. An entire platform that was addressed is what's called school hardening or hardening schools. Some of those strategies reduce the number of entrances. Other strategies provide things like school marshals or having DPS officers or others fill out their paperwork in schools so that there will be a law enforcement presence in schools. They involve different types of strategies that will should make it more difficult for a shooter to get into a school. That said, I can tell you what we all agree upon. We're all going to go back and look at both exactly what was passed, any shortcoming in what was passed, any shortcoming in implementation. I want you to know also that included in those laws were requirements by school districts across the state of Texas to work with the School Safety Commission to make sure that all the strategies would be used and employed and tested, including active shooter strategies for schools to be ready, to be prepared to employ as needed. And so, yes, from pretty much every angle, it was debated. And let me go back in time. This is something where I began working up the governor's plan to respond to this a year in advance.
We will continue to monitor the Q&A portion of this press conference we are seeing here in Texas with Governor Abbott and other government and law enforcement officials talking about what, why, and how to prevent something like this from ever happening again just a little over 24 hours from the second deadliest school shooting in U.S. history. I want to point out here behind me, there is a growing memorial here on the Robb Elementary School sign. You see people have come to lay flowers, candles, balloons, paying their respects to the lives lost, the 21 lives lost. I want to turn now to our investigative reporter, Aaron Katersky, because we heard a lot in that press conference, Aaron, talk about what were the warning signs. We heard Governor Abbott said there weren't any real meaningful warning signs ahead of time. He spoke, of course, of the need of more mental health resources, but he also mentioned these social media posts that happened moments before shots were fired. Talk about what law enforcement has been able to uncover right now and what they're still looking for.
Amy, they've taken a look at some private messages posted to Facebook that indicated the gunman was going to shoot his grandmother, followed by a post a short time later that said, "I shot my grandmother." And as Governor Abbott quoted during the press conference, one about 15 minutes before the massacre began, saying, "I'm going to shoot an elementary school." We're told that authorities are still trying to figure out whether this particular school was the intended target or whether after crashing his car, it was a target of opportunity. The authorities have also been scouring other social media posts, and they've been finding signs of some violent content, including photos of guns that were shared with other users and an apparent history of animal abuse, including videos that the gunman seems to have been posting rather openly. And you heard Governor Abbott there say the suspect had no diagnosed history of mental health, but law enforcement told us that they are picking up signs of anger, isolation, and truancy, indicators that were there even if they were not recognized in advance, Amy.
I want to bring in Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas on this issue as well, because we heard Governor Abbott and so many other officials there praising the bravery and the courage of first responders running into the sound of ringing bullets. But when you look back at what they could have known based on maybe perhaps just some of these very initial social media posts that really didn't give a lot of time for law enforcement to react. But how does law enforcement go about distinguishing between someone who's just ranting on social media and someone who is really intended to create harm in the way this young man was?
Well, Amy, what you're talking about is connecting the dots. You need a holistic approach in which someone would have needed to connect the information that may develop about the animal abuse, to connect it to the issue of truancy, to figure out what was going on in the home. But I do think that what was pointed out at the press conference about these Facebook posts that came just 30 minutes before the attack, the fact that he talked about, "I'm going to shoot my grandmother," then posted, "I shot my grandmother," and then made this signal that he was going to an elementary school, showed that this young man had an intention to kill children.
And Pierre, I'm curious, though, in terms of resources, do law enforcement have the resources they need to monitor people like this in the way they have to prevent tragedies like this?
Amy, I think what we're seeing time and time again is that the question is follow-up. Is information being provided by school officials or family members to law enforcement? And the initial encounter may not be enough. You may have to follow up. And what we're seeing over and over again, as we saw in Buffalo, are situations where there's information that comes out. It seems negative, it seems concerning. The question is there enough follow-up? And then something to flag the system that says, hey, this person who's exhibiting disturbing behavior just went in and bought an assault rifle.
And you would think the people who perhaps knew him best were the people who he was living with. I want to bring in Chief National Correspondent Matt Gutman because, Matt, you were able to talk to the gunman's grandfather and notably his wife, the gunman's grandmother. He shot her. She is thankfully doing well, at least considering her wounds, in the hospital right now. But what did he have to say about this young man? And were there warning signs? And did he ever have any indication that his grandson was capable of violence like this?
Amy, there seem to be two very different stories here. One is from the family itself, specifically the grandfather. The other is from classmates, neighbors, and friends. The grandfather says he saw no warning signs. There was one big blaring warning sign that he didn't take, I guess, seriously enough, and that is truancy. His son did not go to school basically at all this year, he said. Another friend of this young man told me that he was in sophomore classes, even though he was supposed to graduate technically this week from high school, but he never went to school. Truancy is a big red sign. The grandfather didn't notice that the son had started wearing all black, that he had been on social media posting these messages, that he had allegedly purchased these weapons and stockpiled ammunition in the room right in the front of this house where he slept. Grandfather said he never noticed these things. He didn't think that his grandson was going to do something like this or would ever have committed violence. In fact, the grandfather said that he is a felon, which means he is not allowed, he is prohibited by law to live in a house where there is a firearm. So he said he would have reported his grandson had he known. He didn't know. Now, this is what the friends and neighbors say. 5 classmates with whom I spoke, 12 at least neighbors say that this was a kid who was a troublemaker. He hurt animals. He scared people. He stalked girls and boys online. One of the neighbors who was the same age and had gone to middle school with him and high school said that the suspect threatened to kill him because he had stopped being friends with him, that he would text him when this boy was at school. The suspect would text him when the boy was at school, telling him what clothes he was wearing and what class he was in, even though the suspect wasn't at school. He had bullied other girls. He had picked fights with people. He had posted all of this online. And this is the kind of thing, Amy, that should have been picked up, one would hope, one would suspect, long before law enforcement got involved. By teachers, by counselors, by parents, by the community. Somebody should have noted that this kid was in big trouble, that he was crying out for help. But all of those warning signs were missed, Amy.
Yeah, as Pierre said, you've got to connect the dots. Matt, thank you. I want to turn finally now to ABC's Maria Villarreal. She has been here at the very beginning, and you have been talking, Maria, to the family, to the friends, to those who lost those nearest and dearest to them. Tell us what this community is dealing with, where they go from here, what your sense of where we are just a little over 24 hours from this tragedy.
You know, right now, Amy, there is still a lot of sadness and a lot of disbelief in what exactly has happened. And now that has truly turned into tension and anger. And you could feel it in this room today as the press conference was going on. From the moment that people started to take the stage to the governor, you could just feel people were ready and itching to ask him questions about how this could have happened. Why didn't we see this coming? Could have this been prevented? And then obviously, while we were here, we saw governor candidate Beto O'Rourke come up to the stage, rush the stage, and then call out Governor Abbott and some of the people on the stage, saying that they were to blame for this because of their inactions here to do more to figure things out when something like this happens, to have stricter gun laws in place. He also talked about the El Paso shooting and Latinos in this community and how they have suffered. So right now, I think everybody is looking for an answer and trying to figure out, could this have prevented, and why didn't anybody say anything?
Those are the questions, indeed, Maria, and we will continue to follow all of the latest here on the ground here in Texas. Of course, you can follow ABC News Live throughout the day for updates. This is obviously a situation that is fresh, it is raw, emotions are high, and people are suffering and in pain, and yes, they want to know why, but mostly they want to know how we can stop the violence, how we can stop this, how we can prevent it. So we will continue to follow all of these developments throughout the day. We should mention ABC News, David Muir and his entire team is on the ground here in Texas. They will bring this all to you live on a special World News tonight. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, though, have a good afternoon.
This has been a special report from ABC News.